My topic is Death Stranding, and I acknowledge that Larry will not really be able to participate.
I've read a lot about it. I've watched a little bit, so I'm not totally in the dark.
Okay, no, I mean mostly just I think I want to kind of divide this conversation into two halves because I think there are two things that we need to talk about when we talk about Death Stranding. We need to talk about the game itself, which is finally here and in people's hands, and the conversation that has come up around Death Stranding, both pre and post release. I think those two actually mirror each other much more than I think people are willing to say. But let's just talk about the game first. Luke and I have, as we said, we've played. I've played closer to 10 hours. You've played 6-7 hours. You said. Yeah.
So effectively, Larry, I've basically just watched the game. So
yes. What chapter are you in, Luke? Just out of curiosity.
Oh gosh, I have no idea. I think I just got my. I can tell you where I am in the story, but I don't want to spoil anything.
You said 3 or 4 hours, right?
Have you hit a boat?
You've watched one cutscene.
I've not hit a boat.
Okay, then you're not in chapter 3.
Okay, no. I have just really set out into. I have accepted the mission.
Okay, all right. What are your impressions so far? Like, we've actually talked a little bit about this offline.
Yeah.
And I think we could probably come at this at a number of different angles. But what are your just overall impressions of Death Stranding as a game?
Yeah, I want to start with positives, and then we can work our way into.
By the way, I think we can both concretely say that it is actually a game.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, especially as it goes on, there's a lot of game to it. It's very gamey. It's not like, I think we've joked about the fact that you're pretty much watching a movie for the first 2-3 hours. Yeah, which is largely true. But there is game there.
Yeah, there is game, and what there is of the game, like I like the kind of deliberate pace of the game. I like that it is it is effectively a walking simulator in a lot of ways.
In the most literal sense possible.
Exactly.
I have a question there.
Yes.
I expected that to be a negative for you. So what distinguishes the deliberate pace of this game from the deliberate pace of Red Dead for you?
Yeah.
So the thing about the deliberate pace of Red Dead is the pace of it also translated into like the combat of Red Dead, which to me was really, really sluggish, and it's much more a part of the experience of Red Dead than it is of Death Stranding. I think that Death Stranding sets out to be a walking simulator with a very deliberate pace, whereas Red Dead tried to be a lot of different things while also having this really deliberate pace that got in the way of me doing the things that were probably more fun. But, you know, I'm walking to go pick up packages and figure out where to balance them on my body so that I don't fall over when walking up a hill. Like, that's not that fun. So it's not like it's hampering me from getting from one thing to another, you know. So it's different in that regard. But yeah, it's funny. There's a lot of things that feel very Metal Gear Solid-esque about it, just in the sense of the really quirky ways in which Kojima decides we're going to pay a lot of attention to detail here, you know?
Yes.
And we're going to figure out really strange ass ways to explain why I'm making you do this thing. Like there was much made about why you can use the bathroom, about being able to use the bathroom. Well, there's like a lore reason of why your character has to use the bathroom from time to time.
And there's a gameplay reason.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like lore.
Yeah,
what do you mean by a gameplay reason?
Like there's actually gameplay benefits to going to the bathroom.
Okay.
Because I don't know if you've encountered this yet.
Well, I know it like flushes your system of the criminal whatever. I'm terrible with like names and shit and lore.
You also make grenades out of your own piss.
Oh.
Just like real life.
Like real life. Every day. Fill up those test tubes.
So I like all of that stuff because I love the quirk of Metal Gear Solid games. Like you know, just the weird shit you can do of like I'm gonna balloon this guy off to my base, like that kind of stuff. And I don't think there's really any shortage of that in Death Stranding. I think it takes itself maybe a little more seriously than the Metal Gear Solid games have. But so I enjoy that. I'll save my criticisms because I want to let you talk about the things you like, Cody.
Yeah. I do think there's a lot to like about this game. And a lot of it is the gameplay. This is the most... I feel bad for every game that's been labeled walking simulator before this. This is the most akin to a walking simulator that there possibly is. Probably hiking simulator is more accurate, but I find the actual act of moving from point A to point B, which is the thrust of the gameplay here, I find that very engaging, mostly because that they make it engaging. You have to measure each step. You have to be aware of the terrain that you're trying to cross. You have to pack accordingly. I like the fact that your character is essentially a Jenga tower, and you have to balance stuff on your body and on your back. It makes going out on missions and going out on deliveries super engaging from the get-go. You really have to plan ahead. I really like that. The atmosphere of the game is awesome. Yeah. It's a beautiful game. That kind of goes without saying if you've seen anything from it. It does not resemble America whatsoever. And I think that's obviously probably a conscious choice. I don't think a lot of the environments you would copy one-to-one from America make for good gameplay and what they're pursuing here. And I think there's also stylistic reasons for that, but it's a gorgeous game. The music is awesome. The sound is great. I like the fact that, as far as I can tell, you're not going to kill anyone in this game, because there are actual world ramifications for what happens when someone dies. And I like the fact that they've kind of, as clunky as they've done it, have kind of programmed that into the game's lore. I find some of the ideas in the story super intriguing. The way they're presented, not so much, but the actual ideas themselves are a lot of them are actually super intriguing. The acting is great, and Bowie shoulders a lot of the burden of Kojima's writing, especially as you get on in I don't want to spoil things, but the character that Troy Baker is playing is super one note, but that one note is played to perfection, and I love it.
Go ahead.
He's embraced the camp of Kojima so well, and he's really just... People have used the phrase chewing the scenery. I don't think he's even chewing it. He's just swallowing it whole. He's just completely destroying every scene he's in.
But I will say that I don't know. I think Norman Reedus's performance is just... I don't know if it's the performance or the writing or just...
Yeah.
I just see Daryl. He's this lone wolf. He's been hurt too much by the world. He doesn't want to engage.
The Norman Reedus type.
Yeah, he's the Norman Reedus type. He's very much typecast in this.
But I think within that he performs it well. He also is not given a whole... there's a lot of times where he just doesn't say anything.
That's true.
And to me, that's, intentionally or not, that's a holdover from Metal Gear Solid 5, where your character, for the most part, and there are concrete logistical reasons why he doesn't talk, but your character just doesn't talk for large portions of that game, to the point where it's really awkward. I was yelling at my TV in Metal Gear Solid 5. Why the fuck are you not... Someone's asking you a question. Answer the question. That's not so bad here, but I'm still intrigued to see where the narrative goes. But I think the thing I do want to that I like the most, other than the actual act of walking from point A to point B, is the multiplayer. And I think this becomes more significant, especially as you enter Chapter 3. And I'll implore everyone... The only thing I read about this game before playing it was a piece written by, I think, Gita Jackson over on Kotaku, who said, get to Chapter 3 as soon as you can. And I agree with that wholeheartedly, because that's when the game really opens up and you get a sense for what it is. Um, the asynchronous multiplayer is really cool, and I think the first like real innovative step in that kind of thing since Dark Souls. That's where like the actual themes of the game are cemented firmly within the gameplay. The fact that you build things and those things remain persistent in the world if you leave them there for other players. There's obviously something in the background kind of mediating how many players things pop up. Otherwise, your game would just be like the
Just
landscape
ladders everywhere.
It would just be ladders and roads everywhere. But I spent a large majority of my time playing the game today just helping out to finish a section of road for other people to go on. And that's like the whole, they say it over and over again in the game. Like the message is we can't exist as humans without each other. Strands, knots, ropes, these are all consistent things throughout the game in terms of imagery, and they're all meant to bind us together, whether for good or for bad. The game kind of leaves that ambiguous, but the multiplayer is where it really cements that stuff. And I think it's really like I've had my life saved by people's ladders and people's ropes, people's bridges, and I've built things that I'm sure have helped people as well. I'd like to hope so. It's the first game where I've ever really gone out of my way to do something, not just because it'll benefit myself, but because it'll benefit other people behind me. And I think that's a really unique experience in gaming, where often multiplayer is really just selfish.
I want to weigh in on that. I really like that you don't know for sure that your thing helped somebody.
You just have to believe that it does.
Yeah. And that's a great analogy to life. Like some of the most important things we do, we're not going to see the full fruit of the seed that we planted.
Yeah.
And tied to that point, I read an interview with Kojima this week just about how he wanted to get people to step back from the frantic shooting each other multiplayer and just pause and think and step away from violence for a while. And so I do want to correct something I said in our Discord of early on I said I don't know yet if this is a the choices made in this game were deliberate and good and make sense, or if this is just a bad game and we're glossing over it because Kojima made it. And I am now in the camp of I think the game has issues, and yeah, I don't think it's a perfect game, but I do actually believe that these were deliberate choices. Whether they accomplish exactly what he wants to accomplish or not, we can debate that, but I see what he was trying to do, whether he executed it perfectly or not.
Yeah, and I think that he's trying to do something. Like he's trying to say something, and I think a lot of people have given him a pass because of that, whether it's warranted or not. But I think for all like the extensive dialogue sequences, like the extensive cutscenes and all the over the top, on the nose dialogue, he remains like a great designer, and he surrounds himself with great designers. And I think the messages of his game are most effectively conveyed through the systems, and I think that only becomes more obvious as the game goes on. And you do get weapons later on, but as far as I can tell, most of them are non-lethal. Like you get a bolo gun that just kind of ties people up, and you never really can kill the entities, like the ghostly entities. They just kind of go away. So I think this is a game that I acknowledge has massive flaws, and we'll talk about those probably extensively. But I think it's also doing a lot of really cool stuff, and I'm genuinely excited to play it. I've fallen into the gameplay loop. I don't think it's for everyone. I wouldn't want it to be for everyone. I think it's more interesting for not being for everyone. And I will say, regardless of its flaws, I'm glad that it does exist. And this is a thing that is in the world and people can experience.
Yeah. I think that like when I played The Witcher, to me it was like I'm kind of going through the motions with the gameplay because I want to get to these cutscenes and like get to the narrative.
Yeah.
Learn more about these characters. I feel the opposite with Death Stranding. I feel like they're taking it, like it takes way too long to say things that aren't that profound, And I think and look, it's not because it's good or because it's bad. I think it's just Kojima's writing style just doesn't jive with me. It's very on the nose. Is it bad?
It's bad.
Okay.
I think it's bad writing.
Okay, good. I think it's on the nose. I think there's no subtext. It's just all brought into the text, from the names of characters to just
oh my god,
the crazy one-liners that characters will throw out. I just there's no subtlety to it. And not only is there no subtlety to it, but there's no subtlety, and it takes 30 minutes to watch a cutscene, you know? And so you watch it and you're like, okay, well, either I predicted where this was going when it started, or they said the whole point within the first 2 minutes, and now they're just reiterating that point over and over again. Like, so I'm excited to get to chapter 3 where it opens up, because I want to like the game. Like, I was telling Lauren about it. I was like, this is kind of like Chernobyl to me. I watched the first episode of Chernobyl and I did not like it. Not because it wasn't good, but it was like just intense. It was, I can't really describe it, but I finished watching it. I was like, I didn't really like that. But then 2 days later, I was like, oh shit, I'm thinking about Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Like, and I really want to go back and keep watching it. And that's how I feel about Death Stranding. Like, I played it that first day. I was like, I don't really know if I like this. Like, I told Lauren, I was like, I'm kind of upset I bought this digitally and I'm not going to be able to get any kind of return on this. But then like 2 days later, I was like, I kind of want to get back into Death Stranding. Like, it just kind of sits with you a little bit.
Yeah, it does. I think it's really interesting because I think between this, Red Dead, and a couple other games, someone had made the point, and I think it's really, really well put, that a lot of developers are embracing the moments that a lot of other games would skip. This game, the gameplay of this game is the moments that most other games would skip.
Yes.
And I love how reflective, like how it just kind of lets you walk. It's mostly quiet for the duration of you walking. He doesn't really talk to himself that much, which I love.
Quiet's in this game? Just kidding. I'm sorry.
Don't bring up quiet. There's literally a female character in this game called Fragile.
And every time you see her, she's like crying. So,
well, everybody's crying. There's there's a lore reason for it, but it doesn't really matter. But yeah, I love that it's.
Wait, hold on, real quick. Back to the name thing. Well, there's one of the characters who's like, my name is it Mama or Mother?
Mama.
I think it's Mama.
It's Mama.
Like, my name is Mama, and I said out loud, I ain't calling you that.
I would say that to half these characters. Dude, I don't think Kojima understands how names work. There's a man named Die Hardman.
Yes.
Which is I think that's my favorite name.
Wait, what's Guillermo del Toro's character's name?
Dead Man.
Yes, Dead Man. Because
he works in the morgue.
Yes.
This is the writing at its best.
I find this relatable. In my field of youth ministry, like, there's all this pressure to come up with creative names for things, and like, my youth group doesn't have a name. It's called youth group.
Yeah. Fair enough. But yeah, the writing in this game is just straight up, at least so far, is just straight up bad. And I never really have jived with Kojima's writing. I think he gets at a lot of really interesting ideas in really inelegant ways. And ultimately, I think you can take it or leave it. I think people have approached the themes he's getting at in better ways. I still find his decision to like co-opt American imagery and America confounding. Because like, if you're not going to make it look like America, what the fuck is the point of setting it?
Well, it's because he has all these thoughts on America.
He does, and it's very clear that he has thoughts on America. But I also like
that was the other part to me, where in the lead up to this game, it's like, you're gonna notice it'll be subtle. There's a lot of talk about like the state of America and about Trump, and I'm like, they've done everything but said Donald Trump's name in the first 6 hours of this game.
The whole slogan of the organization is "Make America Whole Again."
Yes, yes.
I am continually confounded, sometimes in like hilarious ways, at the writing. that's, I think, the weakest part is the stuff that is most Kojima. In terms of the writing, I actually think the vision. So I'm just gonna waft in between positives and negatives. But
Yeah, that's
one
fine.
thing I do just quickly want to touch on is the visual design of the game. It's awesome. Can't remember the name of the art director, but the style of the game is really cool. And I've always admired, especially in Metal Gear Solid 5, they really make you feel like the gear that you're wearing. Like the character designs are really, in this game, very practical for a reason. I love that you can like see everything on your back, and you can like feel the weight. It's conveyed through how you walk.
And like there's a real, I don't know how they achieve it, but
Yeah.
when you pull the straps in, it makes you feel more stable while you're controlling it. Like it's really well done.
It is. I love that. I'm sure this will get old, but I love the baby.
Like having to soothe it. And
Yeah, I like having to, like, if the baby gets upset, you take it off and you have to rock the controller to soothe the baby. It's a very cute baby. I guess that's all I wanted to say. But you do feel connected to it, despite the fact that everybody's telling you not to. The only other thing I guess I'll say in terms of my impressions of it is I don't really care for the sections where you're facing off against humans. And I think the pacing of the story and the pacing of the early sections of the game is super slow. And I think obviously purposefully so. But some of the systems they start to lay out, I feel, could have been implemented earlier. At the same time, I think the sections where you have to avoid what do they call it? BTs, beached things. Those are really tense, and I love the fact that you can manually hold your breath if you get too close to one, and drains your stamina. So you kind of have to. It's a push pull kind of thing. Those encounters are super tense, and I really like them. And I like the idea that you can't see them unless you stay still. And instead of having a radar, they've essentially implemented the radar into the game world, which is that little arm on your shoulder. I think that's really well done. It's a nice visual touch, and it's a nice way to make you feel more connected to the world, as opposed to just having to watch a radar in the corner of the screen.
I will say, I think the UI can get a little overwhelming at times.
Yes.
Between scanning and the like dot matrix of, hey, here's the safe places to walk and the places you'll fall over, the tiny ass text that's everywhere.
Oh my god.
Which, how many games have to get this shit wrong before somebody's like, maybe we should have somebody that looks at this and says, is this an appropriate font size? And I think it's because all of these designers are playing it like this at their computer.
Yeah.
And they're not thinking about playing it from a couch. But and then also, I get overwhelmed by just the sheer number of packages there are to pick up.
Yes.
Like out in the world, it's just I'm not a completionist by any means, but I'm also am I going to be punished for not picking that one up? Do I have to pick that up? Like,
there'll be plenty of opportunities.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm excited to jump back into it though. It's something that stuck with me. I think there are good things about it, but
yeah,
I think what makes this game so good is that there are such what's the word I'm looking for? There are concrete things that are really, really good about it. And then there are concrete things that are really, really bad about it. And we should be able to function within that space, within that nuance, to have that conversation. And I just feel like the internet at large has been widely incapable of it.
No. Yeah. I use the phrase conversation loosely. I was going to put it in scare quotes in the doc. This is a game that rewards like thoughtful critique, and like it's the fact that it's something is flawed does not mean it's not worth engaging with. I think more often than not, actually something that's flawed is worth engaging with, and it makes you think a little bit more critically as opposed to accepting something as a 10 or a 1. And I think the second part of the Death Stranding narrative is the conversation that's kind of come out of the game post-release. Leading up to it, there was a lot of talk about the Kojima horde, like the horde of fans that are going to accept anything he does blindly. And I think that has borne out to a certain extent, at least in the most vocal group of people who have been talking about it. But I found the reviews for this game super interesting. It was not as divisive as I think I had expected it to be. Although I do think if you read any review written about it, people are struggling to reckon with what this game is. Not like he didn't invent a new genre, he didn't invent a new style of a game, but I think people were struggling to reckon with like the objectively good qualities, as you said, Luke, and the things that are just like outright bad about it. And a lot of those people are Kojima fans. I think a lot of reviewers were right to point out their history with Kojima games, and I think that kind of will probably affect your whether you like this game or not. But a lot of the best reviews did not have scores, and I think those are the ones that are most worth reading, especially for a game like this. But that is not how people in games like to communicate or understand games, and I think that's unfortunate.
Yeah, I think that I saw some 6s, I saw some 10s, and in many people's brains, that's the range. Like a 6 is the worst score a AAA game can get, and a 10 is, and then they define 10 as a perfect game, and I think
it's perfect.
Yeah, and I think every outlet that has given a game a 10 is like, this is not a perfect game. Like 10
There's
is
only one perfect game, and it's cell damage.
Larry with the deep cuts tonight. Cell damage, gauntlet. But shit.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Derailed him.
No, you're good. I do that all the time, so I can't get mad when other people do it.
There's no such thing as perfect 10s.
Yeah, there's no such thing as a perfect 10, and I don't like thinking in terms of scores either. But I agree with you, Cody. I think Kojima was wanting to start a conversation about games.
Yeah.
I think he wants to have a conversation about America, despite maybe not knowing everything there is to know about America.
Or even maybe the most cursory things.
But I do think he started a conversation about games that's interesting.
Yes.
I do. I want to go back and mention one more thing that I hate about the game, and I think any game that gives it a 10, any outlet that gives it a 10 needs to explain how they overlook this, and that is this monster product placement.
Oh my god.
What the fuck is that?
Not even just monster. If you go to the bathroom and the stall closes, there's an ad for Norman Reedus' show.
Yeah. Like, what the hell? That alone is like, you're spending all this time with world building, and like that just pulls you straight out of it.
Yeah, those are the kind of things that would work in Metal Gear, but really don't work here.
Like, I'm supposed to believe that Monster is still a functioning company and that people are stopping to watch AMC.
Well, what do you think all these packages are?
That's true. Maybe
they're delivering monsters.
Your canteen is full of Monster Energy, and when you drink it, it converts water into Monster Energy. This man is severely dehydrated. Also,
that's the only reason that you can turn his urine into bombs.
Also, if Norman Reedus is a thing in this world, who are we as Sam?
I didn't even think about that.
The implications are world destroying.
It's like when a movie has real life. It's like Zombieland when Bill Murray shows up, and it's like, wait. So is Emma Stone a real thing here?
Yeah, it completely pulls you out of it. A lot of people have started writing stories about how atrocious that is, which I'm glad. But yeah, the
beautifully
conversation,
rendered.
Very beautifully rendered. The animation's great when you drink the Monster Energy. I love it. But I think you're right. Kojima wanted to start a conversation, and he has. but I don't know if that conversation is the one he intended it to be.
What do you think the conversation is?
The conversation has become a shouting match between people who don't think you can critique a game for its flaws and those who think you should. That's the job of a critic.
Oh, well, he hasn't started anything then. That's just the conversation that's been going in games forever.
No, but I think he's just sparked that. But I do. I mean, I probably understate with that the fact that I think there's been a very interesting conversation about whether games need to be fun that has been swirling around a lot. I don't know if I would label Death Stranding as traditionally fun in terms of a game. But I don't think games have needed to be quote unquote fun for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
There are plenty of games that I love that aren't fun. I don't think The Last of Us is fun traditionally speaking, but it's a great game nonetheless.
I love
I think people have
emotionally wrecked.
I do too. I do it on a regular basis. I just watch Norman Reedus's tear-stroked face, and I just can't help but weep a river. That Sony ad, that I don't know if you've seen the Sony ad, is just ridiculous.
I have not.
And you know those tears burn extra bad because they're pure monster energy.
It's true.
Sorry, games don't have to be fun.
No, they don't. I just think the conversation around this game has been a little bit more frustrating for me than anything else, because I think there's real potential to talk about like what multiplayer can be and what it actually means to interact with other people in a game world, what we've been conditioned to think of as like traditional AAA design based around killing. I think he's actually said a lot about it by actually no words at all. It's the gameplay. And so I've just found the conversation frustrating in a lot of the ways that I usually find this stuff frustrating, but I think more anew because the game is so bifurcated in terms of its strengths and weaknesses.
Well, and it's this idea that like it has to be it if it is a masterpiece, it's above this critique, right? Like,
yeah.
And it's like, well, the Mona Lisa is a masterpiece, but there's criticism that can be levied against the Mona Lisa. It's not outweighed by the positive things and the things it does well, but it's worth discussing. I'm sure anyone who's studied art in college has had a critical conversation about pieces of artwork that are considered to be masterpieces. Like, you can't call something a masterpiece unless it can hold itself up under scrutiny.
Yeah, I think even masterpieces have flaws.
Yes. Which is why a 10 isn't a perfect score.
Exactly.
It's just an outstanding game. And
yeah, I think this obviously also hasn't been helped by the like some of Kojima's comments. Which there's one in particular that I'm going to read, but there have been several. And I will caveat this with the fact that there's translation considerations that have to be taken into consideration when you're talking about anything Kojima says, because a lot of outlets will just report a translation based on a translation of a transcription, which I think is inherently problematic. But based some of the reception that the game got in America, Kojima felt was a little bit harsher than in Europe and Japan, and he went on to say, this is per Matt Kim over at IGN. Quote, I must say that the game has received some enthusiastic reviews, above all in Europe and Japan. Here in the US instead, we've had stronger criticisms. Perhaps it's a game that's difficult to understand for a certain type of critic and some of the public. Americans are some of the biggest first-person shooter fans, and Death Stranding isn't that. End quote. Point taken, is not a first-person shooter. But I also think part of the conversation that's come out of Death Stranding is you're not smart enough to get it. Mm-hmm. Like anyone who loves the game and people who have critiques against the game, if you have a critique against the game, you just don't get it, man.
Yeah.
Which is, as we've already made clear, the themes are not especially complicated. They're not conveyed subtly. This is also a game where you throw your piss and shit at ghosts. Let's not pretend it's like the most advanced piece of art that's ever been created.
Yeah. No, I don't have much to add there.
I just don't think blaming critics for not getting it is helpful, especially like this is the also wouldn't you think that American critics are more uniquely positioned to critique a game made about America,
About
than anyone
America?
else?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's tempting to just respond, "You don't get it."
Yeah, I know.
And
But no.
how did we get into a collapsed nation where guns were no longer a prevalent part of that experience? Like,
Yep.
I don't know. It's and also just the number of games that have excellent reviews that aren't first person shooters
Mhm.
that have come out of the Sony stable of games within the last 2 years. You know, like God of War, not a first person shooter, one of the most highly rated games
Mhm.
ever. So I don't know. I think it's an odd criticism. I think Kojima is very interested in being the center of a conversation, and I'm not quite positive he cares about what conversation it is.
Yeah. I think it does a disservice to the game too. Like I think the game should be able to speak for itself, and he shouldn't have to. I think the game is perfectly capable of provoking discussion without him.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, as you can tell by the writing in the game, I don't think Kojima is capable of not saying something if he wants to say it.
Mm-hmm.
Brevity is not one of his strong suits.
Yeah.
And the criticisms that I've seen are not criticisms that are like missing the point of the game.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, they're just, and oftentimes it's here's the point. We wish the point wasn't so in your face.
Yeah. Well, and conversely, the game is also not trash. I've seen a lot of people be
No.
like, the game is trash. This game is trash. The game is not trash. Like, I mean, we've been spending the better part of the last 25 minutes talking about things it does well. So,
Yeah, I think this game had a lot of potential to provoke a conversation about like what a quality game can be. I think every game has its flaws, every game has its gifts. And I think this game points out more than any other that the gaming audience is just incapable of distinguishing, of like demarcating between whether something's perfect and whether something's, as you said, trash.
yeah.
Like there's no longer an in between. And I think that's inherently problematic in terms of generating quality criticism, but also like in terms of how we think about games. If we want to be able to talk about this stuff like it's art, which it is, I think we should give ourselves room to like think about art critically. That's what art is supposed to be. You're supposed to do with art. You're supposed to think about it critically. And I don't think that the gaming audience at large is ready to have that conversation, which is unfortunate.
But I can't think of another game, and correct me if you can, where there's no general consensus. I don't think there's a single I don't think there's a general consensus about Death Stranding from a critical standpoint, from a fan base reception standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no consensus. And look, there's always going to be people who are going to be like, The Last of Us is trash, God of War is trash. But you poll 100 people, 98 of those people who have played that game and given it a fair shake are going to say, I loved those games, right?
Yeah.
That's not what Death Stranding is. Like, even the audience that it's intended for, I don't think it's going to connect with anything close to a consensus of them, you know?
Yeah. I think it's not as weird as we thought it would be, but I think it's more idiosyncratic than any AAA game Sony's released this generation.
I don't know how stiff that competition is either, though. So
no, well, I mean, they've released great games. I just think they're all pretty like you understand what it is. Right. I think that's what people are kind of struggling with this. ultimately you're either gonna like it or you're not. There's really no in between with Death Stranding. You're either gonna click with its rhythm or you're not. And I think if you click with its rhythm, like I have, you're really gonna enjoy it. And just the flaws are there; they're worth acknowledging, but there is a lot of joy to be found in Death Stranding, I think.
All right. Well, I do want to, when we complete the game, I want us to come back and have a full on discussion about it, because I am going to play through the whole thing.
I am too.
So maybe we just have a podcast where me and you get together and we just
I'd love to do like a spoiler cast for this game, because I'm sure we're gonna have a lot to say about the plot points of this game.
Yeah.